I think we're all really excited. We can have you all in groups again. All right, it is 1 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. All right, looking forward on the syllabus. So our next quiz is next Tuesday, and so it'll be the frontal lobe stuff, and then the stuff we're covering this week. I think what I'm gonna do is just put it on Blackboard again, and then y'all can take it on your laptops or your phones or whatever, since it's just the multiple choice and the matching. It auto grades it, you know your grade right away, pretty simple. You don't have to wait for me to get off my focus and do it. So I think we'll do that again. Your short papers are due Thursday. So Thursday by midnight, it says in class on the syllabus. I don't know why, because I don't take anything in class anymore. Everything's on Blackboard. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. As with everything else, I will take it late, but again, highly recommending you stop letting stuff pile up because you will hate yourself at the end of the semester if you keep doing that. Yeah, it won't be pretty. We'll just put it that way. The next thing that's due, essentially like by the end of October, are your group project meetings with me, which you should come with an outline for your presentation. The reason these are so early is because about 2 to 3 weeks later, you're actually going to start doing your presentations. So we need to have y'all good to go for that. So the best way to schedule a group meeting with me is to look at my Calendly, pick out a time that works for all of you, and then you can all just log on to the Zoom or the Google Meet, and we can chat that way. And that way you can be wherever you need to be. I can also do before or after class if anybody wants to do that time as well. So then after that, you don't have anything outside of the SGAs due until the 11th of November, which is when you'll give the article to me. So part of your group project is you're going to provide a reading for the rest of the class. I recommend this reading be 10 pages or less, just because think about how much you have to read and imagine your classmates are in the same boat, right? And it's helpful if it's something like a review article or a chapter or something like that, just to remember that your folks and the class might not know anything about this topic you're going to talk about. So make it sort of an introduction. So when you do your presentation, you will, hopefully people will have read your reading beforehand. I can't promise that always happens. It doesn't always happen for me. So, full disclosure. And then you'll give your PowerPoint or skit or video or however else you're presenting, and you'll also provide your classmates a handout that day. And I've seen these handouts take a whole variety of different forms. Some people have made them super fancy and like that brochure, very professional. Other people have really just almost made like an SGA or like a fill in the blank type thing for it. So it's whatever you think would be helpful for your fellow students to study off of, because I will take the questions from your group's presentation off your handout. So on the final, which will be the same format as the midterm, there will be a section of questions. I think I usually do 2 per presentation, multiple choice questions about the presentations. So the presentations really are teaching y'all material that will relate to what you're tested on. Questions about the logistics from here on out to the end of the semester. All right, y'all know where to find me if you need to ask me questions. Email, grab me before or after class, and or make an individual appointment with me. I'm glad to do that. I've been doing that for some folks as well. Alrighty, so we're going to start with the case study today. So it was Ogden chapter 7. Sorry, I was blanking for a minute to get my own typing. For whatever reason, let me actually count how many people are here. I do not have enough copies for today, so I apologize. So I'll do 1 per group, and then you guys can sort of like take notes in your notebook or whatever. And what I'm going to do today, because we all saw how bad I was at dividing up groups last time when I'm tired, is I'm just going to have y'all count off by 5s. And then I'll come around and assign your group a reference. So we'll start over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, great, we have even groups. So find your group members. I'm just, because they're right up here, I'm just gonna give the first people who counted off the sheet for the group. Yeah, because I need to make copies. I don't want to use the library sheet because it's apparently an issue. I will get some copied in Village 2 and bring them next time. So move around, find your 1s, your 2s, your 3s, your 4s. Feel free to, use any part of the classroom. And then I'll get out the markers, and whenever your group is done. And I'll bring up here what each group is doing, okay? Where are my reads? Okay, yeah. If you want to say about that, you BX diagnosis, sorry, that's abbreviation. I just realized y'all might have to.
It's 113.
There you go. So on the board is which group is doing which parts. And I'll go ahead with the markers straight away.
Pretty straightforward. She had a large screen on the posterior parietal lobe, which caused that usually. I generally never get to read the big book, like the reading. I read it one minute. Okay, I do not read the big book. I read this one. She has a large glioma in the right posterior lobe, which is caused. She has heavy neglect, but I'm trying to figure out exactly how to phrase that. It's like right side, left side. Yes. Only see the right side. Is that right side left or left side?
The heavy neglect is the side they ignore, so it'd be the left side.
Okay.
Hey Trey, we're in groups, so just pick one.
Causing. Yeah, that's part of the test. Yeah. So race estimate came back. And that indicated that the frontal lobes are not obviously. They could not specifically attribute that to the neglect or just that she might have had some deletion. I don't know that though. Yeah, it was a 4 to 10. Which is why I was. Her performance tests were low because she neglected the left And the tax and the performance, subjects or, digit sample picture. And that's indicated by the scoring test. So she also got a very good score on objective handling and was unconcerned about the tour. Her memory push is which also indicates that her and her visual showed that she had a visual cut that was not accounted for if she used the visual. So like, if you give her stuff in her any state, which is like outside of the line, so if I'm her, I would not be able to see the laptop, even if I did this. Right now it's straight up, like, even if you get the phone, see it, put it in my laptop. If you were to put the laptop in here, then I could, ow. Do you guys want to look that up?
Prime more space, but we've got one. We're gonna go all the way down today. Oh, that's good enough. No, that's good. I also changed so that it was like, I can use it. Yeah. That's like, for letting you know. Yeah. It's just like, yeah, it's our last week. Okay, good. Yeah, you'll have two more. Don't tell everybody. They're like, people be talking. No, of course, the talk that I have in the other one. You want me to just erase, you had one, or there's an eraser in the office with the brother. Okay, the last time I felt this class, I was in Warrior 255, which has the boards that slide. And I was like the day we did two case studies. It's so much. But I also was justified being there for such a class. So, yeah, it's like Dr. Murdoch was on sabbatical, so we had to do other class that met the requirement for this one, so. I was like, okay, let's do this. What's that? No, so this is right. You're good. Oh, there is. Okay, when we go for next time. Yeah, there was none in group one, where I'm teaching 3 of my classes. So I went out and bought some, and of course, the day I brought in my box, someone had put chocolate. Oh, well, now I have it. All right. So, in group one, kick us off. Tell us about our patient here.
It's Janet. Married to 2 children. She was an administrative secretary and a very active member of the community groups. She 4. And when she had her birthday cake, she could only blow out the left side of the candles and not the right side. Her husband did her and then 2 days later, he found her on the bathroom floor. She was checked in, admitted to the neurology ward after. Well, I think it was 8 months after.
So what do we know about her before this?
Very intelligent.
Mhm.
Her,
Yeah, great sense of humor, very energetic. Yeah, so polytechnic would be something like ECPI or something like that.
The weights are and national goal.
You can wait on that because that's the testing
Okay,
results.
She was very intelligent.
Yes, very intelligent. She originally left school at the age of 17 and worked as a typist before she got married. She and her husband had 2 kiddos. But yeah, and as I mentioned, at the age of 45, she decided to go back and do some business courses and got a job as an administrative secretary, which we would probably call like a executive assistant or something today. So she's clearly someone who's self-motivated, you know, was doing pretty well in her life, right? And then that darn garage door. Okay, so what are the symptoms? This would be group 2.
And she's been essentially lost in the left arm. She's also cut in the left field. A large mass is surrounding the right driveway. She's also transmitting the left and left side. And we kind of generalize.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. The only other thing I have is that she was optimistic to the point of being unrealistic, right? And that sounds like, well, that's not a bad thing, but it can be, right? Like if you're, right, yeah, if you're like way overly optimistic, you can throw caution to the wind. It can be dangerous. And kind of similar to the neglect, just like another example I had written down as the symptoms was that she didn't always dress the left side of her body either. So she'd be walking around with like the clothes hanging off of her right side. And she tended to make excuses, like she didn't want to admit that this happens. And this is pretty common for anyone with this type of, with any type of neuropsychological disorder, honestly. People don't like to admit something's horribly wrong with them. Like, let's be honest. So they make excuses for it. All righty, group 3 are testing results and diagnosis.
For testing results, on her waist and her reading test, it showed that she had superior verbal scores, indicating that her frontal lobes were not obviously affected. She had extremely poor arithmetic skills, but were not necessarily surely related to the Hemi neglect. It could have been related to the fact that women at the time had poor arithmetic education as well. Her 4-digit span scores could have indicated poor attention, but she also showed decent attentiveness on other skills, so that also could not have necessarily been attributed to the neglect. Her performance scores were low because she neglected the left side of every task. So the digit symbols, the picture arrangement, the block design, and the jigsaw puzzles. But she was extremely unconcerned about those poor scores, which was typical of people with right side lesions. And her memory quotient would seem to be superior, also indicating that her frontal lobe.
Yeah, the only other things I have are just more examples from the test. So she did have, I think you all said this pre-morbid superior IQ because they gave her a reading test. And again, that's the best way to tell that. She had really good scores on the WIMS, which is a memory scale. but she did have problems on visual reproduction, again, not surprisingly, right? And so imagine essentially if you're asking someone to copy the ray, a much bigger task, and they only do one side of it. Right, that's essentially what happens with people with hemianoplasty.
The diagnosis is a large glioma in her right vertebra causing that type of deal.
Exactly, yep. And I think at some point in the book, they say visual, tactile, and motor neglect. So, it's not just visual, right? I think a lot of people, when they think of neglect, they just like, oh, they're just not like seeing. It was also like, she wasn't necessarily feeling stuff on that side. And like,
Talking about like extinction versus neglect, and like after her rehabilitation, if you broke her right leg, she would feel it. If you broke her left leg, she would feel it. If you broke both, she would only feel the right leg.
yeah,
It was interesting too that, some more talking about how sometimes like they know, it's stuff that they like choose not to.
yeah.
And I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, the little like the blind thing that we watched the videos about earlier in the semester, right? Where like they can detect something is there. But here, rather than being like, yeah, maybe there's something right there, right? It's they just don't acknowledge it, right? And again, you can see her optimism kind of went into that. Yeah.
I think it goes back to the ADEM case where it's like the different kinds of memory and knowledge and how like you can be unconsciously aware of something, but still not be able to consciously attend to it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really good example. I mean, yeah, these are disorders and dysfunctions and damages in the brain, right? So in some ways, the way that they react to these disorders is similar to the way some people react to what we think of as typical psychological disorders, right? So one of my favorite memoirs that I've had people in my psych and film class in the past read is written by, it's called First Person Plural, and it's written by a guy who eventually got a degree in psychology while he had dissociative identity disorder. And he like knew he had it, but like was still not fully acknowledging it. Like just thought it was like something he was making up or like he was hallucinating or something. And so they videotaped him and he saw himself switching between the different personality alters. And then he like finally stopped denying it, right? So even something as obvious as that, there's part of us that wants to always say, no, 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 nothing is wrong, right? Again, another silly example that I can give you from my life is, my husband's breakthrough case of COVID was much worse than mine. Again, as you all know, I thought I just had a cold at some point. He actually got flu-like symptoms and then he lost his sense of smell. And like the two of us kept talking about it, like, okay, but it's because your nose is stuck up, right? And then we realized like halfway through that had been our check through the entire pandemic of like whether we might have COVID. And like we knew he had COVID at that point in time, like he had tested positive, right? So yeah, there's this big denial thing that we like to have as a piece of that, right? Let me see if I had anything else. Yeah, when she was reading, she missed words on the left side of the line. If they gave her a cancellation pass, she only did the right side of the page, so she's just ignoring this part of her existence, essentially. Alrighty. So group 4 would be impact on life and family.
Said that she was able to return to the job and has happening population, but she wasn't able to function at the previous level. And then her husband had retired early to help her with day to night, take care of her. And then after she died, he was very depressed and felt guilty. He did get therapy, and then his daughter asked him if he could take care of their grandchildren. And he did, and that gave him, I guess, someone who had been helping his wife in the past, and just gave him all of much spirit, and then he could give a positive and help her out of it.
Yeah, so sometimes having that sense of purpose or seeing life, right, in the younger generation can help people move on. That doesn't mean that it makes it go away, obviously, or that it's a magic cure. But again, like, rather than like dwelling in your grief, right, it can help you kind of find a way to navigate that grief and make it meaningful. What is grief but love for something? Anyone who watched the Stelovitz show, but I can't think of the name of WandaVision. So yeah, there's another depressing one, right? I mean, like sometimes these cases, like even though she got better, right? Like she had a massive tumor. Eventually, unfortunately, your life's not gonna last.
I think it also begs the question as to did you think her having neglect had anything to do with her decision to not pursue further treatment? She did, like, when it came back and it got worse, she decided she wasn't gonna go through other surgery, chemotherapy, no radiation, nothing. She just decided she's gonna go the course. And do you think that her, like, the right side lesion causing her to be like unrealistically positive made her truly believe that she didn't have to do anything she was fine?
I certainly think that could be part of it. You know, and I would guess that there was an element to that. But I also know that there just comes a time for people where they're not willing to keep going. So this was way before any of your time, but we had a wonderful professor in rec and leisure named Tina Aldrich, who was only in her 40s. And she, like, in the beginning of the semester, started having abdominal pain, went into the doctor, and she had extremely invasive cancer. And so she tried treatment for like a month or two, and then was just like, it's not worth it to me. And she was gone before the new year. She and I came in together, like we were supposed to go for tenure together. We knew her through our church as well. So it was like very, very difficult to see someone that young. And it was just, for her, it was realism. Like it was just, I can keep putting myself through this. And like, if you all know anyone who's had cancer, right? Sometimes the treatment is worse than the disease itself, including the side effects and whatnot. And so it was just sort of like, I could sort of artificially prolong my life where I can choose to go out on my own terms. And she did that. That was before the Supreme Court case. And she and her partner went to Maryland because it was legal there and got married together. I think it was just a couple weeks before she passed. So she really was able to kind of make her own decisions and lay everything out. But yeah, it was obviously really hard on us, really hard on the rec and leisure department. And yeah, I still think about her sometimes. Yeah. So yeah, I think that there's probably some optimism there, but I think there's also a time where people just get tired, right? And it's sort of, I think we sort of skated on talking about death with dignity in here, right? And like, this is one of those times where I think death with dignity would be the humane thing to do, right? Rather than making people.
I know there's been a lot of strides since like Dr. Gavin Morgan and all of that, but I don't know exactly how far we've come.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let me actually Google it real quick because I'm not sure how many states have it now. Let's see. So California, Colorado, DC, Hawaii, Maine, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. Yeah. And I don't know if you have to be a resident, how it works, but yeah, so when I first started teaching about death with dignity, it was only Oregon and Washington, I think. So it's come a long way since then. And so if you're not familiar with what death with dignity is, it's essentially physician-assisted suicide. So they prescribe you an overdose of morphine, you go home and take it. They're still not okay with like physicians directly administering it, if that makes sense. Yeah, and who Miranda was mentioning, Dr. Death was Dr. Jack Kevorkian, who was from the Metro Detroit area where I grew up. So I remember hearing quite a bit about his story. And he was sort of death with dignity before it was a thing. And because he couldn't find any place to do it, he like, yeah, he had a van. It was sketchy, let's be honest. He drove around in a van.
He would administer like lethal doses of drugs.
Yeah, exactly. So he got convicted, not surprisingly, and he was sentenced to quite a long time in prison. They eventually let him out before his death, simply because I believe he had cancer, maybe also Alzheimer's, and essentially the prison couldn't provide the care he needed. And so it wasn't like he was going to be able to like go do anything on his own anyway. So it was sort of like the, not too harsh treatment part of our constitution, essentially. So he was able to live the last part of his life outside of prison. Yeah, so again, extreme to there are ways to do it that are, legally sanctioned now. And, things like choosing to go off life support, right? Choosing to not do any more treatment, those are perfectly legal. So, it's just sort of like nuance of where we draw that line. Okay, treatment and effectiveness, group 5. Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes that's what we have to do, essentially. Neuropsychologists will help with this, and obviously physical therapists, occupational therapists will try to help the person learn to live as independently as they can, essentially. Yeah, so she had been through a lot of treatment already, right? So in addition to the surgery for the tumor, she'd been through steroid treatment for it. They called it debulking the tumor mass. She'd been through radiotherapy, and so the fact that it came back, right? She did continue to take steroids to essentially try to reduce it. But I think she was just like, why? Why should I keep putting myself through this at that point? Again, depressing, right? But the reality for some people, unfortunately, is that, get something like a brain tumor. There are sort of miraculous cases where people are able to live for quite a long time after. But then there are other cases where it's just too invasive and pervasive, right? So, yeah. So I do have some videos of what patients with neglect look like. So we will watch some of those. Yeah, oh yeah, feel free to go back to your normal seat. Sorry, I forgot I made you move. That was really good. You got to work with different people. All right, so a couple of actual patient videos, and then I have a goofy one from Seinfeld as well.
Virginia, who are we voting for?
Who are we voting for?
We're voting for each other.
What's that? You're gonna vote for me? Okay. Actually, funny side note, there was a year where the Commonwealth Attorney for Virginia Beach was running unopposed and we really didn't like him. So my husband and I both wrote in Dr. Pruitt because he was a lawyer. So obviously he wasn't gonna win, but I told him and he was like, oh, okay, thanks for your confidence.
Unlike Graham, Peggy Palmer has normal vision. She should be able to copy this star easily.
I'll never get this star out easily.
But something odd is happening. One whole side of the star is missing. Peggy has a condition called visual neglect. Although her eyesight is fine, half of her visual world no longer seems to matter. 10 years ago, Peggy suffered a stroke in the parietal lobes of her brain.
The parietal lobes are concerned mainly with creating a three-dimensional representation of the spatial layout of the world, allowing a person to walk around, to navigate, to avoid bumping into things. When the right parietal is damaged, the patient is unable to deal with the left side of the world.
This condition has fascinated neurologists for more than a century because it reveals not only how the brain shapes the way we perceive space in the present, it even determines the spatial look of our memories. This became apparent when Peggy was asked to draw a daisy from memory.
Right. Daisy it shall be.
For neuropsychologist Peter Halligan, Peggy's drawings reveal exactly what's gone wrong.
Is like a radar system, whereby the actual radar system on the left-hand side is no longer working well. If someone comes in on my left-hand side now, or I hear a sound, my eyes will immediately move to the left-hand side. That makes me, for evolutionary purposes, very aware of my environment. Because if I wasn't aware of those things, I'd have accidents. I get hurt, or I might get eaten by wild animals or whatever. Now, in Peggy's case, she will not attend to those things that we would normally be aware of.
Peggy thinks she's drawn her daisies right, until it's pointed out to her.
You've noticed that, have you?
Oh dear.
So what Peggy's drawn for us is several nice daisies with the left side missing. Same with this one and this one. Look at this one. This is a very good example.
I've done it on all of them.
Which means that she's not only neglecting events in the world, but when she conjures up a mental image, she's ignoring the left side of that mental image.
Well, I thought I was going all the way around, you see.
And this shows you that this is not simply a sensory problem, but a problem of consciousness.
It's because I was so concentrating on that side, it takes everything away, you see. Yes, it's attention, really. It's taken away. There must be two attentions somewhere in your body. One side's taking the other one away. I can't make it out at all. Very odd.
Gives note to one of the theories in the book that was like, it's not that they don't have attention for the neglected side, it's that the attention for the non-neglected side is not too powerful.
Yeah, which is really interesting.
It's like more like inhibition than it's about attention.
Yeah, and I think that it's probably a combination, honestly. And what you see, what I really like about that clip in particular is they talk about how it's not just sensory, right? Yeah, it's in your consciousness, it's in your memory. And this makes sense intuitively because when we have people do an fMRI, for example, and we have them do a task like draw a daisy, and then we have them imagining drawing a daisy, the same parts of our brain will light up when we're imagining doing a task as when we actually do it. So that's that consciousness that Miranda was just talking about, where it's almost like we are actually doing it or rehearsing doing it. And so this is why in like sports psychology, they talk a lot about mental imagery, right? They talk a lot about visualization. Because even if you're not rehearsing your muscles, your brain is rehearsing essentially those moves or concepts the same way. So yeah, really, really interesting. All right, another.
Left neglect is a neurological condition, usually as a result of damage to the right side of your brain, often following a stroke or a hemorrhage or a traumatic brain injury, in which your brain no longer pays attention to anything on the left side of anything, including the left side of you. So the person who has this isn't blind. Their eyes see, the part of the brain responsible for vision works, but your brain no longer pays attention. You're no longer aware of anything on the left. Like Still Alice, I brought my neuroscience background to this story, and I did a lot of research up front. So I spent about 3 to 4 months before I started writing anything, just talking to people who have left neglect, people who treat this. I'm talking about a pathological inattention. And I wanted that to be sort of a metaphor for all the ways in our lives right now as a culture that we're not really paying attention to our own selves, our relationships. We're all, doing 5 things at once instead of 1 thing at once. We're multitasking from the moment we wake up to the moment our head hits the pillow. We're trying to be more, do more, have more in a 24-hour period. And sort of the biggest way that people are doing this, that's actually, I think, like the epidemic of this century, because we're on our cell phones in the car. We're texting, we're calling.
In her favor, this was recorded well before COVID. So if everyone's like, that seems insensitive, this is something like, I'll look at the year when I'm watching.
And it's causing a lot of fatalities. It's a huge problem. And it's this is a huge example of where we're not paying attention to what we're supposed to be paying attention to, which is the road, and we're distracted, we're doing something else, and we think of this as normal. So I thought, here's the perfect way for Sarah to cause the condition that's going to cause her to stop and change her life. There's a lot I hope readers take home from this. I hope readers learn a little bit about traumatic brain injury and left side neglect. That's the nerdy neuroscientist in me hopes that they learn a little something. But I really hope that readers also take the opportunity to rethink their own lives, their busy, crazy, multitasked lives, and maybe slow down a little, maybe choose to.
So you get the point. She has a platform, and that's great. But I really like that she had like so the next one, like I said, is a clip from Seinfeld, where one of the characters gets neglect.
What happened to you?
Davola came after me.
What? Davola? See, I told you this guy is crazy. I can't believe this. What happened?
Could I get coffee? But, I was walking home. I had to pick up my helmet from the shop, because I had to get a new strap. So I had it on, and I was checking the strap out to make sure that it fit. And suddenly, I feel this kick hit me on the side of the head. It knocks me down. I look up, and it's Crazy Joe Davola. And he says, "That's what I think of your party."
Boy, that is some kick.
Well, yeah, Newman's helmet, it saved my life. Look at that.
Wow, Newman's helmet.
Holy. I got bad news for you, buddy. Davola says you're next.
Me? Why?
He doesn't like you.
What does he want from me? I didn't do anything. See, this is all Elaine's fault. She took off to Europe with his psychiatrist. He probably can't get his medication. Now I got some nut after me.
Pass the cream.
Wait a second. All right.
You can see again, they're playing it for laughs, but this is very similar to our case, right? Where he just neglected to dress half of his body.
Where the hell did I put this?
What are you looking for?
The remote. I can't find the remote. I lost it. Did you take it? Did you put it someplace?
No.
All right, what is this?
What is what?
All right, very funny. I get it.
You're in a weird mood.
Come on. Go back to your apartment and fix it.
Fix what?
Your pants!
What's this? I got one pant leg on for.
Don't you know? Hey, look at your face. You only shaved the right side of your face. What is this, a joke?
House joke? What, a joke? You think this is funny?
So look at your face in the mirror. Yeah?
It's George.
Come on out.
Please.
You mean you didn't know you were doing any of these things?
Oh, I swear.
I'll bet this is from that kick from that Crazy Joe Davola. You better see a doctor and get some x-rays.
Oh, you're just the man I'm looking for.
Me?
Yeah, here you go.
What's this?
A dry cleaning bill.
From that woman at NBC?
Yeah.
Dry cleaning bill for what?
For vomiting on a vest.
Oh, come on, George. I didn't do that on purpose.
Well, I shouldn't have to pay for it.
Well, neither should I. Jerry's the one that left the milk in the refrigerator.
Yeah, your milk.
He drank it.
I didn't know.
All right, well, we should all chip in, I guess.
Yeah.
How much was it to clean the vest?
$18.
Can you get vomit out of Swain?
I don't know.
Yo-yo, ma.
What? Yo-yo ma?
What about it?
You just said yo-yo ma.
What's yo-yo ma?
He's a cellist. You should see a doctor today.
All right, come on. Let's go. $6.
I can't believe she sent you a dry cleaning bill.
I know.
It doesn't really bode well for the show, does it?
The show. Forget about the show. We should take the idea to a different network.
Oh, yeah, right. Like anybody's ever gonna do this. How did you get me to go along with that? A show about nothing.
If you're not familiar with Seinfeld, that's sort of the premise of Seinfeld. So, yeah, they were giving him some Tourette'sy stuff to, again, just playing it up for laughs. But, sometimes when they do this kind of stuff on shows, they actually research it and see what would happen to this person. And so, yeah, you saw the not putting all the clothes on neglect as well. Alrighty, so let's talk about, let me look at time is. Yeah, we can start talking about some of these other disorders, things related to neglect. And actually, I've got like 5 things I could do right now. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the stuff that gets behind this. So for those of you who have had a chance to look over the SGA, I'm on question 5. And so it's asking about how do we use spatial information for object recognition, guidance of movement, sensory motor transformation, and spatial navigation. So object recognition, how do we actually recognize things? Like, how do I know these are my sunglasses? How do I know this is a pen? How do you know that's, your laptop in front of you for those using laptops? What do you think? What goes into that in terms of sensory input? Yeah, you have to see it, right? And it's viewer centered, right? So as much as we try to be like open-minded and great people, in like basic actuality, right? The way we see the world is centered around ourselves, not being egotistical, just like literally that's what we can see, just what's in front of us. Yeah. And so that is going to determine the location orientation, the motion of an object when we pay attention, right? And so a lot of this comes in the posterior parietal cortex. I'll say that again, the posterior parietal cortex. And so you heard the doctor in one of the videos we want talking about the parietal cortex. We are on SGA 9.
Question 5.
Question 5. Yeah, I skip around on the SGAs basically. With object recognition and all the inputs and how that helps us determine what something is and like more specifically what something is, right? So if we see something even like zooming past us, right? Our eyesight, our consciousness can tell us whether that was a baseball, a softball, a volleyball, or a falcon, right? Like probably pretty rare to see that on campus, but I know we do have bald eagles in the area, for example. So we are able to break that down and know what's what because of our ability for object recognition. And it also, one of the things I don't have in my notes here, but obviously it's also going to pull from memory, right? In order to recognize something, you have to already know what it is. And so that's an important tie as well. Guidance of movement. We use sensitive eye movements, again, same part of the brain, the posterior parietal cortex, to help us figure out how to guide our own movement in relation to space. So again, in the one clip, you saw the doctor like walking down the hallway and talking about how it helps you actually navigate the space, right? So people with blind sight sometimes, or even sometimes people with neglect, although not always, will just not pay attention. So if I'm going through and walking down the hallway, and I have left side neglect, I might run into something, right? Because I'm not paying attention to it. So that obviously could potentially be dangerous in terms of just bodily injury, right? Then sensory motor transformation. This is looking at the relative position of our bodies with respect to the feedback we get from movements we're doing, right? So our brain is kind of always doing calculations based on this. And for this reason, our hands and our feet have like the most neurons or like receptors of any other place of our body because these help us navigate the area. So if you've ever seen one of those, I think they call it homunculus maps, right? Where they homunculus, thank you. Yeah, where they show the size of the body based on, well, let me see if I can pull one up. I'm gonna spell it wrong, don't judge me. Yeah, here we go. They're really ugly images. Okay. Yeah, but it just sort of shows relatively, relative to our ability to navigate space, how many sensors we have. And so you'll see the mouth, the tongue, also the hands, and then this one doesn't quite show it in the way I've seen some other ones, but the feet are also larger than expected because we have a lot of sensory input in our feet because we don't think about it in the same way of our hands, but they're really what help us navigate, right? So if I again am walking and I step on this part of the chair, it's my foot that tells me you better course correct the rest of your body. You don't fall on your butt in front of your head flat, right? So
Like when you almost step on the hot stove or something.
yes,
You pick up your foot and barely-
exactly.
Like you barely
Throw
notice, it's
yourself
like,
down.
no.
Or you're walking and you're like, texting and walking or something, and you step off the sidewalk, right? Your foot can tell immediately, oh, I'm not on the sidewalk anymore, right? And so you're able to, again, course correct. So
Can you repeat this relative position of our bodies?
with respect to sensory feedback from the movements we're doing and also the movements, I guess kind of goes before that, movements we plan and then do, if that makes sense. Yeah, so the outside world and our ability to sense it, right, lets us know whether our movements are the right ones to be making, whether they're successful at this point in time, right? And sometimes it is something as simple as literally navigating the world. Sometimes it's compensating for something going on. So if you've ever had an ear infection or something else that stuffs up your ears, right? You might be the best yogi in the world, but you try to do tree pose, and instead of, sort of chilling like you normally do, because your balance is off, right? All those things we rely on. And so your book talks about a study with Anderson and colleagues who they trained monkeys to essentially interact with a touch screen. And they recorded cell activity while they did that. There are ways that we can do this with sensors that we implant in the monkey's brains. It's not a pretty picture, but it gives us information. The monkeys were then instructed to plan a movement while the cell activity was being recorded. And they rewarded the monkeys if the planned movement was the one that they actually did. And so then the monkeys got faster about it. Now, we're not always going to be given like a direct reward for this, although certainly, right, when you're young, you are directly rewarded for doing certain movements, right? So think about babies learning to walk, right? They get a lot of positive reinforcement, hugs, applause, cheers from their parents, right? If you're trying to teach a kid to use the potty, right? You might reinforce them. Same thing with a dog, let's be honest, right? Like with the way we treat toddlers is very similar to how we train dogs in some ways, right? Like you're teaching a dog to go outside, you reward them with a treat when they come back in. Same type of thing, right? But most of the time, our reward is not, again, like falling on our butts, right? It's essentially learn. What's that? Yeah, exactly. So it's what we would call negative reinforcement. It's taking away something we don't want, like injury, right? The other thing involved here is spatial navigation. And this is our cognitive spatial map. So all of us, to varying degrees, have the ability to essentially visualize the space around us, right? So like just from the perspective I'm at, I know like if I walk out that door and go to the right, not too long, I can walk down the stairs, right? If I continue and I go around the corner, I can get to the bathroom. I can't see any of that right now, right? But because I have a spatial map, I can mentally navigate that and plan my spatial navigation before I can even see it. Same thing for the rest of campus, right? Same thing, especially in a pre-GPS world, right? For driving directions, right? And I'm sure all of you have experienced, if you know how to get to someplace really well, you don't need to turn on that GPS anymore, right? So like the first couple times we went to my parents' new house, we used it. Because they're kind of like in the middle of nowhere and stuff. But now we know how to get there because we go wherever we can. So, we can navigate without it. And so this is root knowledge, like I just said. And that's our unconscious knowledge of how to reach a destination. So this is in the medial region of the parietal lobe. And the neurons will actually show responses with making a specific movement at a specific location. So for example, if you had someone sort of like mentally walk through, again, walking here and walking down the stairs, our brain would sort of, again, as we were talking about before, if we like pretend we're doing something, visualize doing something, our brain will react as if we're actually navigating that space. Now, obviously, this gets more difficult as we take into account more complex information, right? If you're just navigating your house, that's not too hard. If you're putting in all of Hampton Roads, Tidewater, Coastal Virginia, whatever we want to call it, right? That gets more complex, right? People who are cab drivers, for example, have really good spatial navigation. Particularly like in London, for example, there's a test you have to take before you can be a cab driver there, where you have to essentially know how to navigate any place without a map. Again, now we have GPS, so I don't know how consistent that is, right? But certainly some people are better at this than others naturally, and it is something you can train as well. Alrighty. So related to this, there are a whole host of disorders besides neglect that can come up. And I'll go ahead, I should have some room over here and write some of these on the board for you. Just because.
My pronunciation matches what you have in your head.
So the first one we'll talk about is afferent paresis. Okay. And so these are clumsy finger movements. So our fingers, as we call them, the homunculus, are very volitive, have a lot of sensory input because we do a lot of really fine movement with them, right? Like just the fact that I'm able to write with an instrument, regardless of whether it's a piece of chalk, whether it's a white marker, whether it's a pen, right? That has a lot to do with it. So what happens in afferent paresis is that things that other people or even that person previously find easy, manipulating eraser, manipulating a whiteboard marker, right? Their finger movements become really clumsy, so it gets harder to do those skills. And the reason they're clumsy is because they have a lack of feedback of where their fingers are in space, right? So a lot of why we're able to do those movements is because we know what our fingers are doing, right? Again, we're not always conscious of it. We're not always like, okay, index finger, you do this, and thumb do this, and then we'll do this, right? But there's a part of our brain that is aware of that and lets us know when we tighten around the marker so that we know the optimal pressure, right? In afferent paresis, again, it's kind of like heavy neglect, but instead it's like finger neglect. Again, it's not that they're consciously trying not to know what's happening, they're unable to. All right, next is asterognosis. And again, I'll write it up here. There we go. So this is the inability to recognize an object by touch. So you would still be able to manipulate objects. But, again, if I close my eyes, and I'm digging here, I know that this is a dry erase marker. I can't tell you what color it is, right? But just by touch, I can tell you what it is. If I were to kind of go over here, I know this is a roll of paper towels. I I know this is the bottle of disinfectant spray I'm probably supposed to spray the plastic down with, but like, oh my God, we're all masked, it's good, right? So that can sometimes be almost as challenging to navigate as, when you don't recognize objects by sight. Then there's simultaneous extinction. Yeah. Yes. It's almost as bad as not being able to recognize by sight. Sorry. It's that bad. Well, because my eyes were closed. Sorry. Yeah. It was like, yeah, if I look at it, I could say that's a dry erase marker. But if I were to just, again, navigate this space without looking, I couldn't see like this little box, right? I could be like, exactly. Yeah. So that's where it could run into a problem if we're not looking at something and we're reaching for something in the dark, right? I mean, you could see silly, but possibly tragic ways this could play out, where someone might accidentally touch a hot stove, or I don't know if they have a pet hedgehog, right? To get all purple. Those are my friends, especially in parks. But yeah, there are ways that this could obviously be problematic, right? Simultaneous extinction is when you apply two stimuli simultaneously to the opposite sides of the body. And this is what Miranda was talking about earlier with her case, that essentially you only record it on one side. So it was like our case, if they touched both her legs at the same time, she could only report feeling it on one of the two sides. And it was always the non-neglected side. Janet, sorry, I keep forgetting the poor woman's name. Janet.
Apply two stimuli simultaneously.
To both sides of the body, you could only sense one of them. But like with Janet, if I poked her left leg independently, she could tell it was being touched. Poked her right and left leg at the same time, she could only tell the right leg's being touched. Again, you can see how potentially this could be dangerous, right? Navigating an area, your neglected hand falls on something hot. You'll realize it because your other hand is touching something. Then, like blind sight, there's something called blind touch. And this is where you cannot tell that you're feeling a stimulus, but you can generally tell its location. So just like with blind sight, people who have blind sight, they say, okay, what shape am I making with this laser pointer? And they're like, oh no, I can't see it. Okay, so like pretend you could when you see it, and like make the circle. Same thing here, where if you say, okay, what's over here? They're like, I can't feel it, but like, okay, vaguely tell me where it is, and they get a point to where it is.
And these are all disorders of the brain.
The brain look, exactly, yep. Which is also worded like this. And really, they're all disorders of attention. They're as well. All right. Then we have a soma agnosia. This, if you're in the right angle, that corner is very accurate. What's up that? So this is a loss of knowledge or sense of your body in general. Again, you can imagine how very dangerous this might be. You might not feel pain, right? If you run into something, so you might not withdraw. If you accidentally prick yourself or burn yourself, right? Things along those. And then there's anosognosia. And this is unawareness or denial of illness. So I think we can argue that Janet had a little bit of this in her over optimistic state, right? There's a few more of these, but I don't want to rush through them because they actually get sort of increasingly complicated as we go through. So we will pick up with these on Thursday, and then we'll talk also about the types of neglect that we all experience in our day-to-day lives. Already, everybody has a couple days, I know, I'll see some of you more all of that. Okay.
And so like, if I don't take it home with you,